Hey everyone, welcome back to the Castosphere podcast. My name is John, and today we have back on the show Lindsay Philpott, an expert in knots. He has 5 books on the topic. You can find him at theknotguy.com. Today we are going to be talking about which knotting tools make sense. Welcome back to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you, John. It's very good to be here again.
So can you give us a primer? I know there's needles, you have tapered pieces of steel that you have had made. What do you recommend we have?
Yeah, I think that let's start off with a needle. Um, this is there we are, a regular sail sewing needle. It's made by Smith in England of the finest Sheffield steel. The unique thing about a needle of this sort is that the end of the needle, the shaft of the needle here, is not circular, but is triangular. And I want to get into that just a little bit when we're talking about multifilament. So I find that very helpful in feeding a line through itself. Must have an eye that is large enough to accept whatever you're working with. So you can see, there you can just about see it. The size of the eye has to be consistent with the size of the line that you're using. So a needle, and you can see my needle happens to be stuck into a wine cork. Good use for wine corks once they're past their due date as far as stopping off a bottle is concerned. The next tool that I want to recommend to you is an awl, AWL, which has a wooden end to it and is a tapered steel shaft, round in section, and with a point on the end. But I want you to do something which a lot of people hate the idea of, and that is to take a grinding wheel and just take the very tip of the awl off. I can try stabbing myself with this, and it doesn't work because the tip has been taken off now. If I did that with the needle, then I would have several bloody marks on my finger. But taking the tip off the awl allows it to be inserted into a piece of multifilament to wide open a gap and enable it to perform its function. Now, in looking at the awl, which has a round shaft, and the needle, which has a triangular shaft, then we come to the next one, which is known as a marlin spike. Marlin spike is something which has a duck bill to the end of it. If we look at this part, it's tapered flat on both sides. If we look at this part, it's slightly more rounded and makes a shape somewhat similar to the bill of a duck, so that you can insert between individual strands of multifilament without catching any. And that's the whole idea, is that the marlin spike or spike is an improvement on the needle and the awl. In the case of the marlin spike, I've got a small attachment on the end, just a loop so that I can keep it on my wrist all ready for work, and I don't get to drop it in the water, which is always a good thing. Of course, if I'm working at my bench, then I don't need to worry about that quite so much. Drop it on the floor, and of course, it'll disappear. When we're looking at the awl, what I want you to see is that there's a wooden end to it here, which has got a flat piece on the top, which is great for pushing through things. If you happen to have a particularly tough piece of leather or canvas or even several layers of multi-filament. But sometimes if things are wet, they get slippery. And so I recommend putting a finish on that. And I'll talk more about that later. So what's the difference then with the triangular cross-section as opposed to the circular cross-section? Geometrically speaking, if what we're pushing through is something which is formed with 4 pieces like that, it forms a square. The whole is a square. If you have a square and you try and push a square through it, you'll have contact on all 4 sides. If you try and push a circular piece through it, in other words, a dowel or some sort, or an awl, then you will have contact again on 4 sides. In using the needle, you only have contact on 3 sides. Therefore, the needle pushes through much easier than the awl or the marlin spike. So those are 3 of the starting tools. And this one is the high-tech tool, the pencil. It's got an eraser at one end, which is great for pushing on with a needle or an awl or a marlin spike. It's got a finish on the other end, which is similar to an awl in that it's a pencil point that you can push through, and it has a larger diameter here than it does at the beginning. Why is that good? Well, because it allows you to make a lot of wraps and be able to maintain those wraps open while you create the next part of the knot. Another good tool to use would be the outer casing of a Bic or a similar biro pen that you take the ink cartridge out of the middle and then just use that as a tube like a straw would be. So straw, pencil, a marlin spike, an awl, and a needle. And those 5 tools are all that I use, apart from, of course, hands and head to take a look at what it is that you're making and how you remember to make it.
Do you have any comments on those tools, those knot tying tools that I've seen on like social media before, where it's like they allow you to do a couple wraps and then pull it out? Have you tried one of those before?
I've tried one of those. In fact, I own one so that I know what it's like. Um, and I'd say that it's very, very good for the manufacturer. And I say that because the manufacturer gets to make a lot of money from producing something which one of those 5 tools that I told you about um, will do the job just as well. Maybe a tad slower, maybe a tad more difficult, just depending on how much you practice. But really, are you going to gain that much time? It's really a question of the manufacturer being very clever and having produced a tool which will do a great job, but at what cost? You save a little bit of time and not a lot of money.
Absolutely. So then, thinking about it, like we're on the water, say we're on the boat, we need to tie a knot. Are you saying that these tools just make our lives easier, or are you saying that if we get used to making our knots with these tools in the field, they will generally be a better structure, better, more reliable knot because it was done better?
It won't be more reliable than your hands can make it. If you're able to remember how to make it, and you do so by practice, 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 then you will be a great knot tire. If, on the other hand, you have to rely on a tool, it's like the carpenter. If they have to rely on a specific tool for a specific job, and they can't do that job unless they have that tool. Let's say they go to make a bowl and they say, well, I have to have a lathe in order to make a bowl. Not true. All you need is a scorp or a curved blade in order to be able to cut a bowl, or a chip knife of some sort, or a hot rock or a hot stick, so to burn a piece of the wood out. It was done without a lathe before a lathe was invented. And we will continue to be able to do things without those fancy tools as long as we practice, practice, practice. Uh, the other thing is that those tools sometimes get, and I know this is hard to believe, they sometimes get mislaid or lost overboard in our fishing tackle box when we have that on board and we say, I know I had it. Now I can't make the knot because I don't have the tool here. Well, you can make the knot if you remember how to do it by having practiced beforehand.
I think that's a perfect place to stop. You can find out more information about Lindsay. You can reach him at thenotguy.com. And tomorrow we're going to cover decorative knots, something I've never considered. So come back tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Hey, one more thing before you go. If you're on the socials, the Instagrams, the TikToks, the other platforms, follow us. Say hi. At Cast and Spear all over the place. That's at CASTANDSPEAR. I'll see you over there. Chat soon.